I wanted to start today by acknowledging with gratitude all the First Nations on whose traditional and unceded lands I live, work, and play, particularly the Quatsins people whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. I pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and recognize the significant role First Nations people continue to play within this community. Today, I have a story to share with you. A little while back, I was attending a conference session on supporting neurodiversity in the workplace. The organization was one I had worked with many times in the past and had admired, but the information they presented surprised me. The title of the workshop was Supporting Neurodiversity, but it focused mainly on autism and it was very us and them. They made statements like, they don't like loud noises, so keep everything really calm and quiet. And don't give them eye contact. They really don't like that. The presentation almost felt as if they were describing a different species. I was surprised as it seemed we had turned a corner on the understanding of neurodivergence as a natural variation. But then it hit me. Not everyone had the same exposure I have had. Researching neurodivergence is my full-time job. I felt the familiar urge, and I had to say something. At the end of the presentation, my hand shot up. I shared with a sea of young HR professionals that as a late-diagnosed ADHD dyslexic, and the more I learn now, autistic, with 20 years in behavioral science, management, and HR, I help organizations support diversity in all its forms. Neurodivergent people are everywhere in your office, not just in your frontline position. We're also your managers, your leaders, your tech, creative, and everything in between. We all present differently, just as neurotypicals do. When I finished speaking, I again was surprised when I received a round of applause, and it felt like all eyes were on me as I walked out of the room, as if to say, there she is, a neurodivergent in the wild. My latest hyperfocus has been listening to podcasts hosted by a number of different organizational psychologists, all of whom discuss the importance of care and connection. Their message: we need to care for the people we lead, or we can't do it effectively. One psychologist told a story of when she was presenting to leadership and she faced pushback with comments like, "My job is not to like you, my job is to lead you." But then a general spoke from the back of the room. From the highest ranks of the Air Force, we believe you cannot lead anyone that you don't feel affection towards. If you can't find a way to feel connection for the people to lead, then you need to move them out of your direct supportive line. This resonated with me deeply. I know how I managed people before my diagnosis. If I didn't understand someone's behavior, I didn't take the time to understand. I now understand that there's reasons for every behavior. Not one of us wakes up in the morning and says, I can't wait to go into the office today to cause some conflict. Individual differences influence how we communicate, we pay attention, and we process, and our processes for making decisions and how we organize our lives. When people with differences in these areas interact, conflict, disagreement, and misunderstandings are going to occur. We all want to be liked and have values. So let's discuss some of the ways that we can do that. Sorry, I'm just so before we get into what neurodiversity is, I was hoping to do a quick temperature check. I realize that some people who are very well versed, and this is your special interest, and you're at a 10. And for others of you, this is brand new. If you could drop a number in the chat so we can see where you're at, so I'll know where everyone's kind of coming from today. I'm just trying to move it so I can see the chat as well. I did it. Oh, okay. So there's a lot of sevens, nines. Some are new. So we got a good range. Okay, thank you for being so patient. So, what follows under the neurodivergent umbrella depends on who you ask. The list is constantly evolving. It is common for characteristics to overlap, and 80% of neurodivergent individuals have co-occurring conditions. So, when you hear that someone is autistic, dyslexic, and has ADHD, like myself, that doesn't mean Lisa's just a whole lot of work. Just ask my husband. I tell him how lucky he is every day. These conditions do not describe intellect, but individuals can have co-occurring intellectual disabilities. So let's define some terms. Oh, you can't see my screen? Oh, my word.
It must be a pre-Friday thing. It's a Thursday, everyone.
Yes. Is that
Okay.
better?
Yep, we got it. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. If you guys can see my screen right now, I have like six things open trying to All right, let's start again. Neurodiversity. Each one of us is neurodiverse. The term neurodiversity acknowledges that each of us has our own distinct brain wired in our own unique way. Neurotypical. These days, neurotypical has replaced the word for normal. In the words of Temple Grandin, defining neurotypical is about as unhelpful as asking what the average size is of a dog, a Shih Tzu or a Great Dane. When does a little nerdy become autistic? A little distractible become ADHD? These are all continuous traits. Yes, Lisa, thank you. Multiple screens are typically neurodivergent. Um, Divergent, and neurodivergent means so about one in five of us can be differentiated as divergent, meaning our brain functions differently from the norm or the average. We are people with different strengths and challenges who learn differently and perform differently, and not only differently from someone who is considered neurotypical, but from each other. For now, we use terms like neurotypical, neurodivergent to help us gain some understanding, and humans find it calming to categorize, but all of our minds are way more complex and nuanced than that. Until recently, neurodivergence has been defined solely by the medical model. The presentation of the different conditions in the DSM or the diagnostic criteria is very black and white and has strict guidelines on whether you have a condition or not. It is difficult as we all don't fit into boxes. Let's say you're beginning to connect the dots, you know some alignment with your characteristics with someone or with the autistic characteristics. So you decide to go and get assessed. To receive an autism diagnosis, you need to have a certain number of traits in three different domains. But what if you have most, but not enough to meet criteria? You now leave the office as neurotypical, but don't you still have a hard time with some of those challenges? Traits can also change and present differently over time. They can present one way when you're a child and fluctuate with hormones when you're a teen, in adulthood, and when women hit menopause, and into our later years when lack of mobility and cognition can exacerbate traits. Imagine how frustrating it would be if you relied on movement to manage your body or your emotions, and then that ability was taken away. Or think about how difficult it would be for your memory issues if your memory issues suddenly got worse. It's easy to see how these changes could lead to feeling emotionally out of control, frustrated, and a little bit irritable. An excellent way to illustrate neurodiversity is by using a spiky profile, which depicts an individual's skill set. Everyone has a spiky profile, as we all have strengths and challenges in different areas. These neurodivergent abilities and creativity associated with some of our spiky profiles. The rings of skill sets section of the profile. The inner ring, oops, the inner ring represents the more challenging skills. The middle ring represents the average or the norm, and the outer ring represents exceptional abilities. See, there it goes. See, look at the fun stuff. Many of you heard the term high or low on the spectrum, but that isn't the case. Individuals who are neurodivergent tend to have a skill set which is spikier, which has like more peaks and valleys instead of like a consistent middle ground. Neurodiversity in the workplace offers a range of benefits, mainly when included in diversified teams that include both verbal and visual thinkers. People all don't think the same. Visual thinkers think more in pictures, and verbal thinkers process more in words, each utilizing more either of the left or the right hemisphere of the brain. Most of us use a combination of both, verbal, which is more linear, and visual thinking, but tend to lead once more to one side than the other. I was really blown away when I realized that everyone didn't think the same. And I saw what I did in my, and didn't see what I saw in my own mind. I had to test out this theory on my husband, who is the poster boy for neurotypical. Verbal thinkers like my husband tend to think more linearly, and they think at the same speed as they think at the same speed as they speak. They can talk to themselves in their mind or when they're figuring out a problem. And as in the case of my husband, when he's putting together a new piece of furniture, it's like a play-by-play of everything that he's doing. As a visual thinker, I process information more like scenes from a movie. I think in pictures. I see in my mind, for example, like I don't sit for very long, and I'm constantly changing all the rooms in our house. And I don't need to measure or trial and see how things will look in different rooms. I can just close my eyes and visualize. I can see what we have, and I know exactly what it'll look like and if it'll fit in my mind. So this nonverbal process happens much faster than verbal thinking. It's often subliminal, which explains why dyslexics are often unaware of how of their errors or how they solve a problem. As visual thinkers process information faster than they speak, this means at times of high anxiety or when we're really excited about a topic, the words can come out too fast. We trip over our words, or we have difficulty putting our words into what we see in our minds. The sentences can sound jumbled or we can veer off topic. Now imagine this being during an interview process or when you're meeting with your boss. You can sound scattered or unintelligent, not the impression you want to make. Verbal and visual are two of many different thinking styles. Now think about harnessing these great ways of thinking in a team. If you have people who are detail-oriented and great at linear thinking and others who think outside the box, the outcomes can be fantastic. But we have to be able to check our biases at the door to be able and be curious about our perceptions. When you learn about someone's neurotype, you learn about their neurotype. You learn nothing about their intellect, their capabilities, empathy, compassion, character, or their work ethic. Excuse me. And here's where the neurodiversity paradigm comes into play. The neurodiversity paradigm considers that all forms of neurodivergence, ADHD, dyslexia, etc., to be a natural product of biological diversity and evolution. From this framework, things like autism and ADHD are not understood as a disorder, but as a diverse neurotype. In the same way that there's no one right social class, race, gender, or sexual orientation, there's no one right neurotype. We should be celebrating all neurological differences in their and as their valuable variations that enhance the human collective experience. For me, it isn't a diagnosis, it isn't a label, nor is it a word of description. It's a tool that I use to help me understand who I am and how my mind works. It's a gift of understanding. It's science and genetics. It helps me know what I do and why I do it and why I feel the way that I feel. So this is a little bit of a case study, and it's a sample of traits from a few different neurotypes. And since everyone presents differently, Frida could be very similar to someone you know or not at all. So Frida's having a hard time in the office. Either she doesn't seem to say much or she says way too much. Half the time she arrives late and she can seem too irritated for no reason at all. Her desk is a mess. She's up and down. She's in and out of her office. She usually doesn't join us in the lunchroom, but when she does, she talks off topic and she overshares. During the meeting, she can be very blunt with her ideas and suggestions, and it can be hard to change her mind. It is very off-putting. It is hard to include her when she doesn't seem to get our sarcasm and doesn't really seem like she wants to get to know us. Frida is doing her best to hold it all together. The lights, the scents, the sounds, and the constant interruptions make it hard to concentrate. When she finally gets into the flow of a project, she gets pulled away, and the sudden transitions can actually feel painful. I can feel it like up the back of my neck when I'm focusing on something and I get pulled away. It's just this like shoot of pain. When she gets called into a last-minute meeting without an agenda, she feels very anxious and unprepared. Usually, she would doodle with her pen to help her focus, but that looks unprofessional, so she forces herself to watch the presenter. She doesn't retain much in these situations. She sees everyone getting along and making plans after work, but she doesn't know how to break into the crowd. She is aware that she is different and wishes that she has the sense of belonging that everyone else seems to have. She would like to ask for help from her superiors, but she fears if she discloses her diagnosis and what she's going through, she'll feel even more alienated than she is right now. How is Frida feeling? Or what's actually happening for our Frida? She feels very different from everyone else. She feels like she doesn't belong. She feels sensory overload. There's so much information coming in at once, including conversation, environment, trying to decipher the intent of your words. It can be overwhelming and cause irritability. Personally, I may not stop moving or talking, but I cannot handle it when people are moving or talking around me. I physically cannot read or digest what I'm reading. It just looks like words that don't sink in. She is having issues with executive functioning. When you have trouble with executive function, it makes it hard to focus, follow directions, or handle emotions. It can help if you have clear plans, assistance breaking down projects, or tools such as mind mapping or graphic note taking that can help with your nonlinear way of thinking. The funny thing was, is I had been talking about graphic note taking for a couple of years now, and I finally tried it myself a couple of months ago. It is amazing how much it works. She has time blindness. Time blindness is when you can't conceptualize how long something will take or have any sense of how much time has passed. I I have no sense of time. Time blindness is crazy for me. It takes like to me, anything that's gonna get done can take 5 minutes, and I can work for hours without realizing that I've missed lunch. Rejection sensitivity Rejection sensitivity dysphoria is what happens when you can't regulate your emotions to feelings of failure, rejection, or possible rejection. It can cause overwhelming levels of emotional pain. This can lead to perfectionism or trying to find a way to avoid any potential rejection. Emotional dysregulation. At times, our emotions don't fit the situation. When we are happy, we are wildly excited, and our lows are crushing. Even when I know that I'm overreacting to a problem, I can't get out of the funk, and it only makes it worse if someone tries to help me out. Time on my own is the only thing that will bring me back. Imposter syndrome. People who struggle with imposter syndrome believe that they aren't as competent or as intelligent as others might think, and that soon enough someone will discover the truth about them. People who have imposter syndrome are typically successful, and the last person you would think would have doubts about their abilities. Masking is when you camouflage or hide who you are or how you're feeling so you fit in with others and are socially accepted. This includes feeling of anxiety, being overwhelmed, or pretending you can handle your office environment, which can quickly lead to burnout. I can see that there's a lot of people who have time blindness. It's a little trick that I just learned yesterday, little interruption, is if you time all your different tasks for a week, so then you have a better idea of how long something actually takes. And the other one is to backwards chain it. So typically, if we say, we have to be somewhere at 7, we don't evaluate the time it takes to get ready, to put on your shoes, to do the dishwasher and everything else that I always decide to do beforehand. And so if you try to backwards chain it first, then you might have some better help with some time blindness. There has been a ton of research on the benefits of a neurodiverse team when you aim to hire a team with mix of different thinking styles and abilities. It's more important to look at how this mix benefits the whole group rather than focusing much on whether each individual has a perfect balance of strengths and weaknesses. Some people might have exceptional skills in certain areas but face more significant challenges. Others mothers may be more balanced and they spread out more evenly. When these different types of people work together, they can support each other, covering for each other's weaknesses and amplifying strengths. I'm going to just fast forward a little bit because I really want to be able to, um, I'm just going to speed through these so that we can get to the interactive sections because I messed up our time. We all come pre-installed with our, um, we all come pre-installed with social software that includes unconscious bias. We are programmed by nature to lean towards sameness. But it is important what you do with this knowledge to try to reflect, ask yourself why you responded to something in a certain way and to challenge your assumptions. Once I was asked for advice from an executive coach friend of mine who had a friend who was having a hard time communicating with a neurodivergent colleague. She expressed that her coworker was calling her outside work hours, requesting information and forgetting she had called, and then among other things. And I immediately felt animosity towards this manager for not taking the time to understand and support this neurodivergent employee until my friend corrected me. I had jumped to the conclusion that it was a frontline worker who was neurodivergent, but it was actually the manager. I was shocked when my animosity quickly turned to empathy for the manager as the situation reflected my own needs, my own lived experiences. Um, sorry. Don't take all of our traits at face value. So let's say I told you that I'm sensitive to light and sound. So that isn't all the time. I love going to concerts, but sometimes in a quiet auditorium, the low rumble of talking makes me want to jump out of my skin. I love being out in the sun, but a lamp in the corner of my eye makes me go bananas. Too light or too dark can make me very irritable. So really think about having grace for one another. People need to feel safe to ask questions, keep things light, and laugh with each other. Why does it need to be heavy? We need to build our relationships and be able to joke around so we're not afraid to have these conversations. So think of it this way. I have ADHD. I study ADHD, and both my girls have ADHD. My eldest daughter presents like me. Do I still get frustrated when I ask her repeatedly to do her homework or wash the dishes? And she gets stuck? Heck yes. So, how am I supposed to expect you to understand me and my ADHD with my education and my lived experience when I have a hard time understanding myself and my own daughter, who is a smaller microwave version of me? It's essential to learn how we each prefer to communicate and understand the differences in communication. Think about it as a different culture. There's a psychologist, Dr. Megan Ann Nuff, who describes neurotypes as being from different cultures. By learning about these neurocultures, we can understand the why and negate some of the communication barriers that break down inclusion. Communication issues are part of the diagnostic criteria for autism. But if two autistic individuals are having a conversation and neither of them notice that they have poor eye contact or are taking a longer time responding to a question, is it still a deficit? There are so many opportunities for miscommunication, and what can impact this even more is awareness. Sometimes we are entirely aware of how we're being perceived, and other times we're completely oblivious. Once, when I was a manager for a service provider, one of my therapists came to request off a client's team. She was providing therapy for a young autistic kiddo, but she was getting bad vibes from the mother. She told me she dreaded going to the house each day. When the mother answered the door, she barely said hello and gave her the cold shoulder. This mother hates me, she said. When I reached out to the mother and inquired to see how sessions were going, she began gushing about Christine. She loved her. Her son loved her. She couldn't wait. Her son couldn't wait each day until, Christine arrived and he had made so much gains. You see, the mom was autistic as well. She didn't realize the impression she was giving. She had low affects, so she didn't, her emotions didn't show in her face, and she had trouble reading other people's faces, so she wasn't aware of how Christine was feeling. It's always good to investigate and ask questions before making assumptions. Another time, I was on the phone discussing a situation with an HR manager in a different region. Partway through the conversation, she burst out. She's like, "Don't worry, Lisa. Everything's going to be okay. We'll get it all worked out." I was shocked. I didn't realize how loud I was getting, which gave the impression that I was upset. Some of us have issues with prosody, which means at times, without realizing it, we can talk way too loudly or way too quietly during conversations, use different intonations and rhythms. I was also thinking out loud, which gave the appearance of anxiety. The HR manager worked on the mainland, and so she didn't work with me day to day and wasn't used to my tone variability. At least it was a good opportunity for us to have a good laugh when I explained myself. So I'm going to break this down even farther, um, of how breaking down language can help with communication and communication barriers. So let's say you notice that most of the time when you ask Joe, one of your colleagues, that he seems to take a long time, he takes a really long time to respond. You find it really uncomfortable sitting in the silence, so you try to reframe the question to help Joe out, but he still takes a long time to respond. You're feeling really frustrated, so you vent to a friend at the office. Your friend explains to you that Joe has slow processing. So, what do you think when you hear this? The first time I heard slow processing, it gave me the impression of someone having lesser intelligence. Now I can tell you what's happening to Joe is more like a deep processing. Joe is taking in so much information, it just actually takes longer. When I'm speaking to someone, my mind goes into overdrive. It sparks multiple ideas at once. It's almost like I can see like folders. It's like I want to like figure out how to like fix the problem. I want to, a relatable story that I want to tell, and like half the time, like something off my grocery list. So on top of that information, I'm trying to figure out the context. Do I look weird? Does the idea sound smart? I'm trying to read your face to see how you're taking the information. And then on top of that, I hear someone walking by in the next office or someone flicking their pen. It can be impossible to filter. Now, the next step, so let's explain this metaphorically. Think of it as if you were driving in a car with your family on vacation and you notice that you're lost. The music is going, the kids are singing in the background, your partner is talking about what they want to eat for lunch. What is the first thing that you do? You turn the music down and ask everyone to quiet down for a second so you can think and find your way back. We can't turn the music down. Do you feel differently about Joe now that you know what's going on in his mind? Now, how about if I tell you that internal processors like Joe can take up to 60 seconds to respond? And each time you reframe that question, it resets. It can lead to frustration on both sides. So now, if you understand this, the time waiting for him to process feels a little bit less uncomfortable because now that time has meaning. What if we take it a step further and ask Joe how he prefers to communicate? Joe lets us know that if you have work questions that require some thought, meaning not, Joe, what do you like in your coffee? That he would prefer to have the questions emailed to him with that information in bulleted form so that he can give you a thoughtful response. When you appreciate knowing that, it saves you some guesswork and time. Productivity goes up, people are comfortable, and Joe is able to let his true strengths shine. Okay, first off, I'm going to apologize how cramped the next few slides are going to be. I'm breaking the number one rule, as Janine, who is also here viewing, knows that I have way too much information on the slide, but I wasn't sure how else to do this. So before the presentation, you were sent a basic outline of some preferences that could be included in a work style profile. With the rest of the time we have together, I'm hoping to lead you through the development of a profile and answer any questions you might have. So this is the first time I'm trying to present in this format, and I've already like ate up some of our time. So this is either going to be like super fantastic or completely bomb. So we will do it all together. I'll be recording your answers and keeping the chat so that in the end, I can revise what we've all worked on together and I'll send you an updated profile. I realize with a group this large and our time constraints, discussion can be hard and people may not feel comfortable speaking up. So I've also included my email address. So if that's your preference, please feel free to email me with your ideas and input. I want to hear the good, the bad, everything in between. But what I would really love to hear is what strategies or adjustments that you have found that have worked for you. It's funny, the best advice I have received is not always from the expert, it's from all of us. We have many years of practice engineering our own environments for success. Okay, so now if the manager came in and dropped this on your desk with no other information, what would be your first impression? Would you want to fill this out? Anybody feel like this is like You would want to feel it out? What would you consider to be some of the benefits and drawbacks? Too chaotic? 100%. So Sheila, that's really good to know is how exactly it's going to be used. Too personal. Like even just reading it now, I would feel like I would want more information. Like it would put me off. That's a good suggestion too, the difference between unionized environments and not. And I think what Lisa was saying is is mirroring what quite a few of you are saying, is just worried about being misunderstood or judged. Um, okay, so let's try this. So now, what if the profile was delivered with an explanation? So this is just a kind of an excerpt. It's a breakdown of the hybrid remote question. So it highlights some of the reasons that hybrid and remote options benefit both the individual and the organization, what could happen for an individual in an office environment, and some examples. Currently, this focuses mainly on neurodivergent individuals, but I'm hoping to evolve it to highlight who else it could help. So let's say for hybrid or remote options, like parents, would benefit from this. Or if you had, adaptive software, would also help individuals who have English as a second language. So that is very beneficial for everyone across board. So does this help in any way, having this information? I know it's a lot to process and it's very busy. Sherry, I thought the same thing too. There's a number of different organizations use something similar to this. And there's one that's called a Manual of Me, and I think it's created by someone in New York. And it's just the questions like, tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like, how you work best with no, and I think because I'm also a bottom-up thinker, I need more information. There's no way that I can process without knowing more in like what situations and circumstances. Yes, Ashley, I'm so sorry. I will also be sending out the slides, so it might be easier to read. And like this is what I was thinking, that it would be a side booklet so that you can use it for reference. Okay, so what would be what about if when I brought this out and it was much easier to read and you have some time to digest it. And I bring you all in for a group discussion to introduce this profile. I'll tell you that, okay, everybody, we're going to give this a go. Who knows if it's going to work? But I've heard some great things from other organizations who have used it. So if you're up for the challenge, I would love it if we could do this together, and I would love your feedback and ideas. So, if it's going to work for us, we can tweak it and modify it as we go along. So note the inclusion and bonus points if you use some humor to connect with your people a little bit. Now, what about if I move into some storytelling using my own lived experience? So I know when I first saw this, I would be hesitant to let my guard down and show my weaknesses in case of the used against me. In a previous position, when I was an HR manager, I worked for an organization that had a very neurodivergent crew, and we used something a little bit like this. So due to my ADHD, I excel at problem solving and putting out fires, and I have a way with connecting with people. Due to my dyscalculia, I suck with numbers. Not a lie. I used to dread payroll. It would take me forever because I had to recheck it multiple times, and I would be anxious that there would still be mistakes that I didn't see. It would end up costing the organization money when we had to rerun payroll to correct my mistakes. It was extremely embarrassing. So I went to my CEO and we decided to modify my job description. So keeping me focused on what I was good at and giving the payroll to someone who preferred to work with numbers and not so much being in the limelight dealing with people. All of our work was done faster, more accurately, and we were happy. It was a beautiful thing, let me tell you. It made my day. I hear you, Melissa. Okay, so now if what if we presented the information that's after the data is correlated? You decide what information you want to share with the team. If you want to, information that you might want to just share with, let's say, HR or a few people, like in the circumstance where I modified my job description, you can modify it over time. We could store it in like your HRIS system or your workplace um, software. And so this way, it's light. You're able to see when someone's working, when they're not, if they like a quiet environment, if they have headphones in, like, if Steve here is having a bad day, he really would appreciate a cup of coffee. How does with this, how does this make you feel? Is there anything that you would add or to be able to make it that it would work within your own work environment? It's really hard in this short period of time, hey? I like the visual as well. I'm just doing training on graphic note taking. I think it's there's huge research on memory retention and understanding information when you detail it using graphic note taking. And this is the point, is we want to be able to this shouldn't be just for neurodivergent individuals. It should be for everyone across the board. Everyone has their own likes, dislikes, strengths. We're all different. And so if we are able to share this and break down some of the barriers. So now what if your organization had somewhere in the office on their software where they just list all the adjustments that they have available for everyone to use across the board without having to ask for adjustments or accommodation? So many organizations are moving towards this globally. It promotes team culture, limits exclusion, and increases productivity and retention. So, like, think about it. Assistive software. Would anyone get upset in the office if everyone could access text to speech software? Do neurotypical people hate it when they have access to a quiet work area, bulleted pre-meeting agendas? Would anyone storm into their manager's office when offered a flexible work schedule or the possibility to work, hybrid or remotely and just say, like, enough is enough? Like, if it's across the board, there's no exclusion, there's no us and them. I think so. Even if I think something like this being implemented within a work space would have to start in a pilot area and slowly, because there is so much trauma from the past, fear, like you would have to be able to be implemented slowly so that people would trust it. And each team, if that's a good idea, each team could design their own format of what works for them or what doesn't. And the best thing with something like this is it can be modified over time. Every system I've ever created is like a constantly evolving being for it to be able to be effective. And when everyone has a say in what's happening, there's more inclusion. Like every time I have been able to share my own weaknesses as a leader with my team, it is amazing how many people come to me with their needs or their ideas because there's a comfort level and a connection. So, thank you for having me today. If we've got a few more minutes left, if anyone just has any generalized questions, um, I'll be able to see what I can do. There's quite a few places that do offer accommodations to everyone in the workplace. It just feels nice. Like where I used to work, like I said, I'm coming from like a bit of a unicorn land where I worked with a team of, I think there was about 15 clinical staff, and we had a team of 100. but like 90% of the clinical staff were neurodivergent and they were OTs, speech language pathologists, and behavior analysts. And so it was very commonplace for us to have accommodations across the board. And it was common to hear someone talking out loud. And if I had an issue with focus or something else, I could just walk across the office to an OT and be like, this is what um, my issue is. And she was able to help each other out. And so it was odd for me going into different organizations where it wasn't just what we did. Oh, us, us and them. Sorry. I agree. It has to be required, um, just like respectful workplace training. And there has to be a very, very strong anti-harassment and bullying policy in every organization um, that details exactly what would happen during any kind of situation. Inclusion statements, yes. Yes, well, what I'll do is I'll take all this information, I'll make it look better, add what you guys have all sorry, what everyone has offered. If there's any emails, I can send it out to everybody and then we can even tweak it from there. Or you can take that template that I've sent you and modify it for your own work places.
There
If
are
anyone has, oh, sorry.
there are a few questions in the Q&A, Lisa, if you wanted to go through those. It's just beside the share button.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Let me find it. Ah, there we go. Pros and cons of medications. Okay, so medications, this was something I did a huge deep dive in when I first got my diagnosis at the age of 40. And I was trying to find um, the best medication that was the most effective. So 80% of people do not react well, or they don't, medications don't have the proper effect to them. And with all the different medications, there is no best or worst. It's everybody's bodies react to them differently. So it's a bit of trial and error. Um, I I had to try a few until I found one that works for me. My daughter cannot take them at all. So it's very body dependent and your preference. So the other thing that is very helpful to either be assistive with ADHD medication or instead of is exercise. If you are able to do exercise, me personally, the only way that I'm able to focus for the entire day is I used to be a competitive rower. I have an erg under my desk and I set the timer for an hour and I just like erg to one song really loud. And that heavy work for that, 3, 4 minutes is huge at being able to help me focus for the entire day. If I don't do that and I get stuck on the computer by 2 o'clock, I've got no capacity to think and I just get these wicked headaches. So the hugest thing is we are terrible at eating and drinking water at proper times. And there's also been a lot of research on the cold shower or the cold bath, which helps regulate if you are not using medications. What thoughts, insights, wisdom do you have to share around connecting and coaching ADHD staff members when their decisions, actions are having a negative impact on the quality of work required? It's it's a hard one because it's like my constant wave. And again, I've been working with, and most of my friends are neurodivergent, and it's just like this up and down. Um, again, you have to go, I always go back to data, what's working and what's not working. Um, but also know that, especially with ADHD, um, there'll be a day when we work like enough of 100 men. We can work like 10 hours straight. We get a ton of stuff done. And then the next 2 or 3 days, we get minimal amount of stuff. It's hard to get focused and get started. So if you're able to, if you were to average out how much work that you did in the week, it would be very close to if you work the same amount every day. It's just, but we beat ourselves up over it. And also to like there are a lot of benefits of neurodivergence, but it is hard. There are times when you just can't focus and there's off days and it's just I find it hard myself just to be allowance for that. And the best thing I think would be if there's any way to provide education for the organization about all of these different changes and learning more, um, a more in-depth information about supporting neurodivergence would be able to help out the workplace. So 53% of Gen Z um, identify as neurodivergent. So in the next 10 years, there's going to be a literal flip of the near minority. And now with the, that there is this focus on neurodivergence, there's a lot more late diagnosed individuals who are coming to realize that, after they go past the stereotypical and they see the begin to see the different traits in themselves. So more of this is going to be needed. Sorry, backwards chaining. I come from a data land. So backwards chaining is if you take any kind of task, let's say making a sandwich, and you do the last thing first. And so you write it all down. And so each step would be the first step would be like getting out the bread, peanut butter, jam, but you would have everything done and go backwards. So if you were doing uh, for doing your time, instead of focusing on the time that you have to leave, write down all the things that you have to get done. Find your shoes, your clothes, your keys, how long it takes you to get ready, and focus on the first thing, and then so it's all in a chain. I'm sorry, I described that terribly. Um, so one thing that autism and communication is is uh is definitely about learning about different cultures. And so within the autistic community, being very blunt and um being blunt and telling exactly how what you think and what you feel like to each other is very appreciated. It's like I'm trying to help you out. And so there is like the bluntness that especially in Canada, it turns other people off. And so um there has to be a communication is a two-way street. And so there's learning about autistic traits in communication, but also neurotypical. And so there has to be a little bit of give and take and understanding of to create that path of connection. And so it's much easier when you're working let's say within a team and then you figure out these like even having the communication profile or the workplace profile to be able to delineate the best ways that information is broken down so that let's say the barrier is if you know bluntness is the issue, being able to work it out verbally or written beforehand, or how we provide information so that is understood across the board. Um, it's it's a great thing to be able to have all the different neurotypes together, but it is hard because everybody that's the miscommunication and how we talk is all different. And so it just takes a little bit more of, yeah, both sides. Um, Sharing this information to wider teams to get more buy-in. Education is the best way. I don't know if I've partnered with a number of different neurodivergent um, companies on doing neurodivergency or neurodivergent or neurotype training. I'm trying to move away and just be more about neurotypes, so it's less of the us and them, to be able to create some of that understanding so that you're able to put supports in place. Um, but education is the best and um, ongoing education. Like this is great, but it's so much information in a short amount of time. It's hard for it to be able to really be impactful. Um, Thoughts on open concept office design? I, for me personally, how I would like it is I love the open concept for the times when because I love collaborating with people, but I 100% need to have a quiet space to be able to get any work done. Um, like hybrid is my favorite. I love being able to go put on big people clothes, host all my meetings, talk to people face to face. I like that fills my bucket. But then the next day, I am like on the computer, no sound, no anything, and just hyper focus on getting all my work done. So for me, it has to be a bit of a balance. Um, and just I think it's great that understanding where your triggers are and figuring out the different strategies and supports that will go to be able to support how you work. And I the other thing that I heard the other day, which made me feel so much better, is we spend so much time figuring out all the different strategies or agendas or calendars or whatever's going to work for us, and we put all this effort into creating these agendas, and it works for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden it stops, and you feel like, oh no, like another thing's not working. But we have an interest-based nervous system, and so when you think about it, that strategy did its job. It was effective for the time. It was no longer novel. And so now it's the next thing that you come to. So understanding that strategies work sometimes and don't work others, and you might need something um, novel or new to be able to get back into that zone again. Um, Learning more about procrastination, being able to use it effectively, as in, this might have been a part I skipped, was about whenever I'm huge at procrastinating and I wait to the last minute. But now I use it to my advantage where whenever I get an assignment or a project that I need to get done, I put a note in my phone. And so I keep putting everything in every time I'm out and about and an idea pops into my mind or something that I'm reading relates to it, I pop it into that note. So when it comes down to the hard line when things have to get done, um, and I go back to my note, 80% of my project is completed because I've spent all that time processing it. And because I've been thinking about it for an extended period of time, it ends up being a lot more um, uh, developed.